Did you know that there's something much more important than what you feed your kids, or how much sleep they get, or how quickly they learn, or what kind of routines they have? It's true. The number one most accurate predictor of your child's future success is your relationship with them. And this isn't determined by how much you love your child, or how much they seem to love you, or how wonderful your intentions are for them. Those things are assumed here. This has to do with the level of attunement that you have with your child. If we want to prevent ACEs in our children and set them up for a life filled with success and happiness, it's necessary to apply parenting techniques that promote attachment, relationship, and overall emotional health in their bodies, minds, and souls. In today's video, we're going to discuss 9 ways to develop a high-nurtured environment to create optimal experiences for your children and to effectively break the cycle, especially if you were affected by adverse childhood experiences in your past. I talked more about ACEs and how they relate to parenting in this video, so I'll put a link in the description at the end. That way you can go back and watch it if you like. If you're new to the channel or you haven't yet joined this community all about promoting emotional and financial well-being, do that now before we get started. Just click the little red subscribe button and the bell beside it to be notified every time we talk about something new. So how do we develop high nurturance environments that our children can thrive in? As with any other kind of growth, it starts with awareness. It's using every opportunity to ask yourself or your child, what's going on in this situation that made you say or do this thing? And that way you don't take it personally as a parent. This enables you to respond versus react, because reacting is kind of that autopilot impulse. So to learn to respond, we have to become conscious of the actions of ourselves and our children. One of the next steps we have to take is to look at some of the things in life that may be affecting how we're parenting. For example, the number one ignored but most hindering issue is the amount of stress that we parents carry around with us. And some stress is normal, but when we consistently carry around a heavy load of stress, this directly affects the child's development. Subconsciously, children take their parents' stress on themselves even if they don't know what's causing it. And since the brain development of children and toddlers is almost completely dependent on the relationship they have with their caregivers, it can have a very damaging effect, especially if the stress is ongoing. And the adaptations that young human beings have to develop to survive this ongoing stress will interfere with long-term well-being. And if you're thinking, wait, my child is 5 or 10 or 17, is it too late? Definitely not, and we're going to talk more about that later in the video. This all starts in the womb. Studies have shown that babies who are highly active in vitro have very stressed out moms. The biggest stresses that affect unborn babies, infants, and toddlers alike are stresses from the parents' past traumas and any resulting adaptations, which we talked about in this video, and stress from interpersonal relationships, especially with a child's other parent. By reducing the amount of stress that you have in your life, you automatically create a safer, healthier place for your child to develop. It's one of the most effective steps that you can take as a parent. Even more important than what you feed them or how much sleep they get. Not that those things aren't important, but they don't even come close to having the same effect on the development as being a high nurturance parent does. Another thing we need to become aware of is the emotional availability we have for our child. And it feels like this should go without saying, but today's parent has less emotional availability than ever before. We're busy with overloaded schedules and burdened by 2-person budget demands and distracted by modern day problems and devices and just overly stressed, as we already talked about. When all these things are present, it leaves very little emotional energy to parent the way that we want to. Once we become aware of some of these hindrances, then we can start to focus on a solution. And the solution, in addition to offloading overburdened stress and becoming more emotionally available for our children, is conscious parenting. This means being purposeful about moment-to-moment interactions and resisting the urge to slip into autopilot parenting. Too often, we brush aside our child's bids for connection with, "Sure, honey, that's great, sweetie. Mommy's busy right now. Coming in a minute," etc. You know the things that we say to brush aside our child's ever-present demands. So it's extremely important to use conscious parenting to connect with our child as often as possible, because it directly affects their development cognitively, emotionally, and socially. So here are 9 ways that you can begin to consciously parent your child. Co-regulation is just warm and responsive interactions that provide the support and modeling and coaching for children to be able to understand and express and modulate their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. This might be surprising, but the only way that your child is able to learn how to regulate him or herself is if you co-regulate him during the developmental years. When your child becomes dysregulated, and the younger they are, the more often this happens, he or she needs you to be in a regulated state so that you can help him or her work through confusing emotions and situations. Too often, parents are almost as dysregulated as their children, which creates this environment of constant conflict and chaos. When this is the case, a child is forced to adapt to a dysfunctional style of relating and sadly brings that into all future adult relationships. Frequent eye contact signals to your child that he or she has your full attention, and when they're babies, this comes so natural as we hold them and coo at them. But once they're mobile, this has to become an intentional act on the part of a parent. Stop and ask yourself, how often do I make eye contact with my child? Other than when I'm trying to get him or her to cooperate, of course. If you're like most parents, it's even more rare than you think. But by becoming aware and purposeful, you'll be able to find those opportunities throughout the day where you can get down on your child's level and make eye contact, even if it takes a couple extra seconds. The tone that we use in all relationships conveys as much or more than the words that we say, and the same can be said for body language. Believe it or not, a child is able to pick up on a parent's mood and intention by observing nonverbals, just like an adult can, and the older the child is, the more true this is. Touch is one of the most powerful tools of attachment. Snuggling, cuddling, kisses, hugs, pats on the head, holding hands, tickling, rustling, etc. Studies have shown that healthy physical contact lowers the cortisol levels in both the mother and the child, thereby improving immune system functioning. By continually providing nurturing touch, you can help facilitate enhanced social, emotional, and physical development from a young age. A child is never too old to need a hug from a parent, but it seems less instinctive as they get older. So it's necessary to sneak in a hug as often as you can think about it. Attuned communication is made up of 3 parts, and the first part is to have empathy. It's having compassion and seeing his points of view, as immature and underdeveloped as they may seem. Another part of attuned communication is to really listen to and validate your child's feelings. And sometimes feelings can seem a bit ridiculous from an adult's perspective, like hungry, bored, scared. And it's tempting to try to comfort them by saying, "That's not scary," or "You're not hungry, you just ate." But collectively, these seemingly innocent or mindless comments can deny the child's reality and make him or her think that the feelings aren't valid. And if we go one step further and show annoyance toward those feelings, and this is easy to do when the timing isn't convenient, when we don't have time to stop and validate because we're so busy, eventually the child will adapt by learning to ignore his or her feelings. If it happens every now and then, that won't be the case, but I'm talking about when we continually dismiss or ignore their expressions of inner reality. Instead, if every time the child says, "I'm hungry," or sad, or happy, or scared, we just take a brief moment to empathize and validate those feelings, it will teach the child very important things about himself. Like, it's okay to feel things, my feelings are valid and important, Mommy will be there to listen, understand, and comfort me when I have feelings. This builds crucial trust, assurance, comfort, and connection, and eventually the child will learn to regulate his or her own emotions and learn to be in touch with them. We talked about co-regulation earlier. This is a big part of it. Be honest with the child and focus on the positives and express your willingness to talk about any subject. That way he or she will feel safe to come and open up to you about anything in the future. And the third part of attuned communication is called mirroring. And mirroring is basically just what the name implies, reflecting back what the child is trying to communicate. Again, even if it seems petty or immature or inconvenient at the time. So often it seems like these moments arise just when we're feeling the most behind schedule, but it's super important to just briefly pause and respond. Jennifer Clary gives a wonderful example of this when she talks about a child's resistance to wanting to put a raincoat on as the family's rushing out the door. And she advises saying something like, "Oh, honey, I know the raincoat's hot and bulky and uncomfortable and you don't want to wear it, right?" Eye contact is super important in these moments, even if you feel like you don't have the time to spare, because this lets the child know that you're attuned to what he's expressing. The way you respond in situations like this can impact the child's entire day, whether he's going to school or somewhere else. So, attuned communication can be summed up as the ability to feel and respond to a child's reality and feelings. Children need attunement to be secure and to develop well. It's actually a biological need that we all have, but it's especially important during the developmental stage because our children are dependent on us for co-regulation. One of the necessary parts of parenting is discipline, and your child craves boundaries even if he seems to resist them on the surface. Boundaries and discipline foster security because it creates a safe space for the child to live from. Be sure to use constructive, fair, and consistent discipline as a form of teaching as opposed to punishment. Discipline helps a child know the difference between right and wrong, whereas punishment creates feelings of shame or wrongness of being and lowers self-esteem. All children and families are different, so you'll need to learn what's effective for your child. And actually, showing approval for positive behaviors decreases the need for correction because children intrinsically want to make us happy. And by using every opportunity to teach, this helps your child learn from every mistake he or she makes instead of just receiving consequences. Response flexibility is the capacity to pause before taking action, and this is where a parent's able to assess the situation, delay reacting, consider a few options, and then initiate action. When we stop and analyze a situation instead of just reacting to it, it prevents a lot of unnecessary emotional damage from occurring, and it also saves us those moments of regret later where we're like, oh, I wish I'd handled that differently. So every parent messes up, and most of us mess up a lot, but that doesn't mean it's too late. The only thing worse than messing up is pretending like something didn't happen, because the last thing we want our child to believe is that being mistreated by us or anyone is normal. But if we brush past our parenting mistakes, those moments when we're too impatient, too frustrated, too harsh, not gentle, and not understanding, etc., that's exactly what happens. Children are extremely subjective, meaning what they see from you is what they perceive as normal life. In order to prevent them from entering a life filled with one dysfunctional relationship after the other, we as the parent have to set healthy standards for relationships. So repair is all about being authentic with our children, admitting when we make mistakes and mistreat them, and explaining why it wasn't okay and that they don't deserve to be treated that way. And it doesn't have to be this long, drawn-out conversation. Something simple like, "Sweetie, remember when Mommy yelled at you earlier today? I just wanted you to know, Mommy should never yell at you. You don't deserve to be yelled at, ever. Sometimes mommies make mistakes, but I wanted you to know that it really bothered me that I hurt you because I love you." And that's it. Kids are some of the most forgiving creatures on earth, and when they see you humble yourself and care that you hurt them, it not only teaches them that they're valuable, but that everybody makes mistakes. And when we do, it's important to make it right with the person that we hurt. This teaches the child the value of apologies and cooperation and patience and forgiveness and consideration for others. And it's also important for you to forgive yourself and realize that no parent is perfect. There are going to be slip-ups and setbacks, but in my opinion, repair can be one of the most bonding experiences between a parent and a child. And remember how I said earlier, if you have a 5 or a 10 or a 17-year-old, that it's not too late? Well, that's because these nurturing steps can be effective in healing even if you start today, regardless of what age they are. We are never too old to have a healthy relationship with our parents, and there is rarely too much damage done for repair and healing not to be effective. Obviously, the older a teenager is, the more difficult it will be to rebuild and repair, but with consistency and commitment to the process, even the most distant teenager can be brought back to recovery and healing in relationships. And the same goes for you. I talk more about healing and recovering in several of my other videos, so if you want to find help for yourself, feel free to browse the channel, because good parenting really does start with the health of a parent. If we can learn to love and care for ourselves, loving and caring for our children will be a much more natural process. Lastly, parenting is a monumental task for anyone. Do not be afraid to seek professional help if you're struggling or overwhelmed by your child's behaviors and emotions, or if you're struggling to control your own frustration or anger. Sometimes just by talking it out with a therapist, you can get to the root of impatience. I always advise going to a trauma-informed therapist because they are usually educated in the areas of attachment and self-regulation. It's also helpful to have taken the ACE test, so if you haven't already done that, I'll include a link at the end of the video. That way you can go back and take it. It's free, it takes 2 minutes. It paints a picture of what you went through as a child and helps to shed light on some of the things that might be hindering you and your ability to parent the way you want to. If the things that we discussed today are implemented in your day-to-day moments with your child, it will greatly impact his or her future, more so than anything else that you can do. I know we covered a lot of ground today, but hopefully you found the information useful, and if you did, please give the video a like so that helps others find it, and also put a big yes in the comments so it helps me know that you connected with what we talked about. Feel free to ask questions there too, especially if I left something hanging or didn't fully explain something. I'd also love to connect with you on social media, so feel free to send me a message on my page, Leah Theobald. And also make sure to sign up for the giveaway while you're there. I'll put a link in the description so it's easier to find. Next week, we're going to be discussing how ACEs affect physical health and longevity. So make sure that you're subscribed and that you have your notifications turned on so I can let you know as soon as that video is released. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.